All right, what is up, people? So, in this video, I want to talk about step by step my journey in software engineering from the day I started my degree to the time that I landed a six-figure job offer. Right now, there are many ways I kind of considered going about for this video. Initially, I considered literally talking about everything, going in depth about every single course, but I think A, that would have been a lot of fluff, B, that would have taken a long time, and C, I think a lot of people probably wouldn't have cared. So, the way I decided to go with this is to really touch on the macro, the major points, the points I think will be most helpful, that will provide the most value, right? Another point that I want to make clear right from the start is this talks about my software engineering journey, right? What I mean by that is we'll be talking about 101 mistakes I made along the way. Another thing I considered was, should I talk about the mistake and then talk about how I would avoid that mistake? And I felt that would have made the video hard to follow because now I'll be talking about two different things constantly, right? So I decided to stray away from that as well. So what I'll do is I'll release this video, which will literally be step by step my journey, including the mistakes, including all the dumb things I did, and then I'll release another video. In that, it will be like, okay, if I was in the same position tomorrow where I have zero CS experience, right? What would I do step by step, knowing what I know now, to get to a high-paying job as soon as possible? That's the second video I'll release, right? And that will talk about the optimal ways. So this video again will be just the journey, raw, true, honest journey with the mistakes, everything. This is not what I would optimally do, knowing what I know now. And the second video will be the optimal path. Without further ado, let's dive into it. I remember clearly, this was December of 2019, right? And I had just signed up, or rather, I had just finished my criminology degree. And I was like, I don't want to be a police officer, right? I was talking to some police officers that I knew, and it seemed like policing was one of those careers where work-life balance was really hard to nail down, right? Because you have shift work, you're working nights, sometimes you're working days, and just from the nature of kind of the things that you see, I found that it was usually a very tough balance to strike, the work-life balance for police officers. And I was like, I don't want that. I want my job to be my job, and I'm here ultimately to enjoy life, right? I'm not here to be so close, to have my work and life so closely attached, right? So I was like, okay, I don't want to be a police officer. What am I going to do? And I had always kind of been into technology, right? As a kid, I'd been into technology. Throughout high school and college, I strayed away from it. So now I was like, okay, let's try this computer science stuff. At this point, I had a horrific academic track record. I failed multiple high school courses, didn't graduate high school on time. I failed a college course. I was a super average college student. So it was actually pretty intimidating signing up for computer science, right? Because computer science seemed like the smart people profession. So there were all these thoughts running on in my head, and like related to imposter syndrome. Am I smart enough to do this? Will I be able to do this? CS is, the smart people thing. I don't know, right? But one point that I'll harp on again and again and again, and I've literally talked about this on the first video I released on this channel. Hell, I talked about this in the last video I released on this channel right before this. And you'll notice this as a constant pattern in my videos. I credit this to achieving my goals all the time because it truly is the one thing that changed my life, right? And now what is that? Well, that is focusing on less, literally focusing on one thing if possible, right? Like I mentioned, I had a horrific academic track record, but by December of 2019, I had achieved my goal physique from a fitness point of view. And before fitness, I literally had nothing going on in my life. Every single time I'd be like, oh, I'm going to do this. It's going to be great. And, 2 weeks later, I'd drop whatever that thing it was I was pursuing. So I had nothing going on in my life. I felt like an absolute loser. And I was like, okay, I can't take this anymore. So I'm going to dedicate myself to fitness. Even if I do nothing else productive all day, I'm going to make sure my nutrition's on point, my workouts are on point. Nothing else matters. All right. I did that. I did that day in, day out, for 2 to 3 years, made 1,000,001 mistakes, but I ended up achieving my goal physique. And that's the same mindset I was going into tech with. Because with fitness, when I started, I think even part of me didn't think I'd be able to achieve my goal physique. And I remember people laughing at me when I was like weighing my food and all this stuff, right? Like even my family members, even like they jokingly laugh and mock a little bit, and it's like, I don't think it's negative. They're not trying to like hurt my feelings, but obviously it hurts your feelings a little bit, right? It's like when people kind of mock that, So I was like weighing my food and doing all these things, and friends and family would even mock it a little bit sometimes. And when as I started to see the differences in my physique, as I started to literally be in better shape than everyone else who was mocking, right? Then people weren't mocking anymore. Then the vibe changed quite a bit. So that's an important point that I'll harp on as well. Is at the start, as you may have similar experiences, whether it be with tech or fitness or whatever it may be, right? Don't let that get you down. Now, anyway, long story short, I decided to take that same mentality towards computer science. I was like, okay, this worked out for me in fitness. It helped me achieve my fitness goals, which initially I was, kind of hesitant on whether they would be possible or not. So I was like, okay, let's take the same energy into tech. So I was like, okay, even if I do nothing else productive all day, I'm gonna make sure my coding computer science work is done. As long as that's done, that's a productive day. And if that's not done, I don't care what I did today. Today wasn't productive, right? The one thing has to be done. The rest is just a bonus. The rest, meditation, fitness, that's just a bonus. If I do it, great. If I don't do it, I don't care. This has to be done. And that's the number one point. And again, the number one thing I credit to my success, right? To my achievement of the goal. And that's why I harp on it so much. And I've harped on it for like maybe 5 minutes at this point. So I'll move on. So anyway, when I started the degree, I started with the intro to programming course, which was related to like Java, and they were talking about like objects, and I'm like, what the fuck is an object? I'm reading this book, and I just want to throw this book across the room. And let me tell you, I didn't understand a damn word from that book, a damn word, right? I remember handing in my third assignment, and like just fingers crossed, hoping I'd pass, and I'd failed that assignment. And I got a tutor, and he was trying to explain it to me, and I didn't understand a word he was saying either. But again, remember my mindset. This is my one thing, right? Now, what I mean by that is because it was my one thing, I was dedicating anywhere from 5 to 8 hours every single day. And now I'm not saying you have to do that, right? This is actually one of my mistakes, which I'll touch on in the next video. You actually don't need to study that much, right? There's a point of diminishing returns that comes with 6 to 8 hour days or whatever, right? But that's a whole separate topic. So I was studying anywhere from 5 to 8 hours every single day, including weekends, because again, this was my one thing. So I was like, oh, nothing else is done. I don't care. Did I study 5 to 8 hours of coding and computer science today? Yes or no? Right? And if I did that, again, great. That's a successful day. So I did that. Right? And I actually ended up getting an A or an A minus in that course. I don't remember exactly. So I ended up doing well on that course. Right? So that's that's the most important point that I would put out there. Focus and consistency. These things are non-negotiables. At least in my experience, non-negotiables. Right? And that's what helped me the most. So anyway, 6+ hour days. Now, with those days, right, I wasn't always the most focused on the right things, so to speak. I was context switching a lot. And this is something I've talked about in other videos and deep work. And again, I won't harp on it right now because it might detract from the journey. But I was constantly context switching, where I would be like, oh, should I focus on lead code? Should I focus on project? Should I focus on this course? Should I focus on that course? And that actually hurt my progress quite a bit. But again, I just want to keep this honest and show the mistakes as well. So even though I was studying 6 to 8 hour days, because I was context switching so much, doing this thing for a little bit, doing this thing for a little bit, doing this thing for a little bit, there were a lot of things I was doing which were largely useless, and looking back were a waste of time and didn't help me move the needle forward whatsoever. So say it's a 6 hour day that I was studying. Maybe I spent 3 hours focusing on something that didn't move the needle forward. And that was a waste of time. I would have actually gotten better results by focusing on the impactful thing for 3 hours and then resting my brain for the rest of the time for a more productive day tomorrow, right? But this is what I was doing. I was taking like Cold Steel's Udemy course. I remember taking that. I was taking Dr. Angela's Udemy course as well. And then what happened was when I took Dr. Angela's Udemy course, right? This was about 6-7 months into my journey. I took that course, and that course has you build like some basic front end web projects. I built those. I started applying, and I remember getting my first job offer 8 months in. Right now, had I taken that and ran with it, I would have probably been in a position. Well, that job was a bit of a commute and stuff as well, so I didn't take it because I wanted to focus on my degree. I didn't think I'd be able to do both those things at once, at least not optimally. So I didn't want to quit my degree. I kept on with my degree. But had I taken that alone would have probably got me to a point where I would have had experience 8 months in, and I could have leveraged that for higher paying jobs later, and I would have been set, right? So 8 months in, I got my first job offer. But another thing I remember about that Dr. Angela Udemy course, and this is another mistake, right, is the front end projects, they were on the easier side. But when the course got to the point of like setting up MongoDB and doing some of the back end stuff, again, I dropped it. I was like, I'm not going to do this course anymore. So parts of my personality from previous where, I would get excited about something, but as soon as it got hard, I would let it go. They were still showing up in different ways, right? The form of procrastination had just changed from before, where I would just not do anything, to now I was like, okay, I have to study for 6 to 8 hours, but I would maybe not focus on the hardest thing, or the most impactful thing. I'm gonna watch this YouTube video. That's work, right? So that's another mistake I made, which I've now learned from, right? So focusing on spending 6 to 8 hour days working, if you're not focusing on the right thing, is not the most productive use of time, right? So that's something else I've learned. Now, January of 2021 was when I started sending out applications for internships. Mind you, I'd been applying before too. That's how I got that job 8 months in. I had been applying throughout this, basically since the day I started my CS degree, I started applying, right? Because I was just trying to get a 6 figure job as soon as possible. That was my only goal. I wasn't like, oh, I'm passionate about computer science, so I'm like this, Nick. No, I just wanted to get into the field as soon as possible. That's all I was focused on. But January 2021, I applied to a government of Canada position, and I knew when I applied to this position that when you apply, they just send automated coding tests to everyone, right? Now, this can be a great way to get your foot in the door, right? Because what happens is they send this test to everyone, regardless of which university you're from, what experience you have or don't have. And if you pass that test, then they'll look at your application, right, and consider moving you forward if you meet the bar, right? So this is actually a great way to kind of even out the playing field, and I really liked it, right? So anyway, I applied there. They sent me the coding test. I passed that coding test. I had another phone interview, passed that phone interview, and I ended up getting that job offer. Now, in the job offer, or rather in that job, in that internship, I had the exact same mentality. Now, here's another part which I I did, and I probably wouldn't do again, is when I was doing like this one thing stuff, right? Again, I was studying 6 to 8 hours every single day, and I would constantly trying to motivate myself, drive myself, and I was coming from this place of extreme hostility almost and anger, right? Because like no one believed in me, no one believed I would be successful in computer science or anything like this, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna prove these guys wrong. I can't believe they don't believe it, and then that negative self-talk would circulate back to myself. What I mean by that is when I was on this job, again, I was literally like, how jobs are 8 hour days, right? But who realistically works 8 hour days? Like no one. But I was working 8 hour days. Like I was literally timing, from start to end. And anytime I'd take a break, I'd stop my timer. And I wouldn't stop working until, I'd hit my 8 hours, right? So I was working a full 8 hour day, right? To the T, to the definition, right? And I would have a lot of negative self-talk going on. Like say someone gave me a task and I wasn't able to finish it, I wasn't able to figure it out. I'd be like, oh my God, you're like, I'm going to use nice terms here. I use not so nice terms to myself. I'm like, oh my God, you're so pathetic. How are you ever going to, get like a 6 figure job if you can't even figure this basic stuff out? What is this? And how are you going to prove to other people that you can do this, things like this, right? So it, this negative self-talk and stuff, it did end up getting me to my goal, right? But again, it didn't get me to my goal in the most optimal way. That's the point I'm making there. But anyway, long story short, I did that again. Same thing with that job. Just the one thing. Focus, focus, focus. Even if I do nothing else productive all day, did I put in 8 hours toward my job? Right? Did I put in 8 hours toward my job and give it my absolute all? I took the same, like a lot of you will be familiar with like the training to failure concept in the gym. That's what I did when I was doing the gym thing, right? I'd train to absolute failure, every single exercise to failure. That was my mentality. Every single exercise to failure. That was like my metric of success. Did I push every exercise to failure or did I hit my macros? Right? So I had a similar concept here what was like by the end of the workday when I put in my 8 hours, my brain should be mushed. Like, did I push my brain to absolute failure? Right? That's the way that I was thinking. So anyway, I finished that internship. It was a 4 month internship. And I ended up getting a certificate of recognition, which my supervisor told me they'd never given out to anyone, and he'd been working there for like multiple years. He said he didn't even know he didn't even knew that it existed, right? He didn't even know it existed, and but because my performance was so good, they gave it to me, and it was signed by my supervisor and my manager, right? So that was that was how that went. So that was great experience. A, it was great experience, and B, I performed really well in it. So I was in the process of getting bridged. Bridged is basically went from internship to they were offering me a full-time position, right? And that position was paying something like 85K, but I kept applying, and I got hit up by this big tech company that wanted to interview me, and even in the interview, right, I had the same mindset. Oh, hard work, got to push to it, like trying to push my brain to the limit. And again, that's all it was. Like I harp on this so much, But I really feel like if you have the focus and you're showing up day in, day out, and you're iterating, and the failures and lessons that come your way, you learn from them. Like, your success is inevitable, right? So while it may seem like an oversimplification, what I'm doing, just saying, focus, put in the hours every single day, and improve from the feedback you get. That may seem like an oversimplification. That's literally all I did. Literally, that's all I did. And yeah, I was able to get to my goal. But anyway, this big tech company hit me up. We did the interview. The rest is history. They gave me a 6-figure job offer, and that's how I got to that point. So again, I tried to filter this down to just the major things, and I've actually written the major things down right in front of me so I can go over them one more time. Now, what are those major things? One is focus. Second is iteration. And that's it, right? Now, I just want to talk real quickly to some of those people who may be in a similar mindset to the old me, where you believe in kind of the negative self-talk to motivate, and you believe in like pushing your brain to absolute failure every single day, and you think that's like the way to go. I would say, from what I've learned now, that actually hindered my progress a lot more than it helped me, right? Because while it did keep me motivated, I always had this kind of edge and anger and hostility, right? Which does drive you to move forward. I would compare it to training to failure at the gym. And if we look at some of the research that came out of like Renaissance periodization, who do a lot of scientific research on muscle building, we know that pushing your muscles to failure all the time is not the optimal way to grow. Similarly, the best example that I can give to really drive this point home is, say someone asks you like the most basic math question, right? Like, what's 5 times 5, right? But there's like 5 people looking at you, or maybe there's like a crowd of people looking at you, right? While you're trying to answer this extremely basic math question, which you would answer like that if you weren't under like the stressful situation, right? Since your brain is under like that stress, and it's like, oh my God, well, what are people thinking of me? And like, since your brain is kind of distracted, it isn't even able to focus on the problem, and maybe you'll give like a dumb answer, like, 10, but 5 times 5 is obviously not 10. But if you were just relaxed, if you weren't under this state of hostility and anxiety and anger, right? If you weren't under that state, you'd be like, 5 times 5, 25, of course. Easy. And like, let's get a hard one next time, right? That's how you'd be thinking. There's a certain element of being in a relaxed state, right, that actually leads to higher productivity, in my experience. But when you're trying to, whether you're trying to solve a problem or whatever it is you're trying to do, when you're trying to solve that problem, and at the same time you're fighting these thoughts of like, oh, I can't believe he said this, and I'm going to show him, and I'm going to show him, then instead of all your energy going towards the problem, it's also going these 20 different ways. So let's say your brain energy is like 100%, at least 50% is being carried to these distractions, and only 50% is going towards the task at hand. Now just think about that logically. Will that lead to the best results? Or will you get better results if you are able, and I know it's difficult, trust me, I know it's difficult, but if you're able to let this 50% of anger and hostility go, right? And now you're able to put 100% towards the task. It's just something to think about. Again, in my experience, that's that's a huge lesson I've learned. Right? And I wanted to put that out there. But again, I believe, I truly believe, right? Which is why I say it all the time. I wouldn't say it if I didn't believe it. I would literally just not make a video, right? Because I'd rather just not make a video than give wrong advice. And I'm not saying it's like the best advice ever and I have like the secret or something. That's not what I'm saying. But I believe with all my heart, if you put in the focus, you keep on doing it day in, day, show up day in, day out, you do that. And you iterate, right? You do have to be open to feedback as feedback comes your way. Obviously, like some feedback will be nonsense, right? Like not all feedback is good feedback, but generally speaking, if it's good feedback, take that, and use that to improve. As long as you're doing that, your success is inevitable. Success is inevitable. And I think that's really all I have to say on the matter. So December 2019, when I started my CS degree, August 2021, when I got my 6-figure job offer, throughout the time, just showing up every single day, 6 to 8 hours. And that's it, right? That's really all there was to it. Showing up, doing my coursework, applying a whole lot, and I achieved my goal. So I hope that helps you out, right? I really hope it helps you out. If you have any specific questions, please do leave them in the comments or shoot me a DM on Instagram or something like this. I'll leave my Instagram and TikTok in the description, also somewhere here. So please do support there as well. But yeah, any comments, messages, questions, doesn't matter. Shoot me a DM. I will respond there. And thank you so much for watching and taking the time out of your day. I'll talk to you later. Peace.